When my husband passed away, I thought the worst pain was losing him, but I was wrong. A week later, at the lawyer's office, I found out my daughter had inherited our home and $6 million. All I got was a rundown cabin miles from town. At first, I tried to stay calm. She was my only child, after all. But when I came home, she looked me in the eyes and shouted, "This is my house now. Go live in your cabin, old woman." That night, I left with nothing but my suitcase and my pride. I had no idea that the place she called worthless would change everything. Before we continue, tell me where you're listening from. Don't forget to add your country's flag and the city you're in. I read every comment, and it truly warms my heart to see how far our stories travel. My name is Helen Parker, and at 56 I never imagined I'd be starting over. Michael and I had built our life together on Cedar Lane in Vermont. 32 years of marriage. Watching the maple trees change colors each fall, hosting neighborhood barbecues, and dreaming of growing old together on our wraparound porch. The funeral was a blur of casseroles and condolences. Chloe, my 38-year-old daughter, had flown in from New York City, where she worked as a corporate lawyer. She wore black designer clothes that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and she handled the arrangements with the efficiency of someone organizing a business merger rather than saying goodbye to her father. "Mom, we need to be practical about this," she told me the morning after the funeral, her manicured fingers tapping against her coffee cup. "Dad's affairs need to be settled quickly. I've already scheduled an appointment with Edward Wallace, the estate attorney. I should have seen the warning signs then. The way she avoided eye contact, the way she kept checking her phone during conversations about Michael's final wishes, the way she spoke about being practical when we should have been grieving together. Edward Wallace's office smelled like old leather and fresh coffee. The walls were lined with law books that looked like they hadn't been opened in decades, and his mahogany desk dominated the room like an altar. Mr. Wallace himself was exactly what you'd expect from a small-town Vermont lawyer, gray-haired, bow-tied, and possessed of the kind of old-fashioned courtesy that was becoming rarer each year. "Mrs. Parker." "Miss Parker," he said, gesturing for us to sit in the chairs facing his desk. "I'm terribly sorry for your loss. Michael was a good man, and I was honored to help him with his estate planning." Chloe leaned forward, her business persona fully activated. "We appreciate your condolences, Mr. Wallace. Could we please proceed with the reading of the will? I have a flight back to New York this evening." I felt a stab of hurt at her impatience, but I pushed it down. Grief affects people differently, I told myself. Maybe this was just her way of coping. Mr. Wallace opened a thick folder and pulled out several documents. "Of course. Let me begin with the primary bequests." He cleared his throat and began to read in his measured, professional tone. "To my beloved daughter, Chloe Parker, I leave the family home at 247 Cedar Lane, Vermont, along with all its contents and the sum of $6 million from my life insurance policies and investment accounts." I felt the air leave my lungs. $6 million? I knew Michael had been successful as an architect, and I knew we were comfortable, but $6 million? And the house. Our house, where we'd carved our initials in the old oak tree, where we'd painted every room together, where we'd planned to spend our golden years. Chloe's expression didn't change, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes that I'd learned to recognize as satisfaction during her childhood. Mr. Wallace continued, his voice growing gentler as he looked at me. "To my beloved wife, Helen Parker, I leave the cabin property on Maple Hollow Road, along with all mineral and land rights associated with that property." A cabin. A rundown cabin that Michael had inherited from his uncle years ago, tucked away in the woods miles from anywhere. We'd talked about fixing it up someday, maybe using it as a weekend retreat, but life had always gotten in the way. The roof leaked, the windows were cracked, and the last time I'd seen it, vines were growing through the foundation. Is that everything?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Wallace looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Parker, your husband also left specific instructions. He wanted me to tell you that you would understand his reasons when the time was right." Chloe was already standing, smoothing her skirt. "Well, that settles everything then. Mom, I'll need you to start making arrangements to move your things. I'm planning to put the house on the market within the month. The words hit me like physical blows. Chloe, that's our home. Your childhood home. Don't you want to? Mom, be realistic. I live in Manhattan. I don't need a house in rural Vermont. The market value alone will set me up perfectly for early retirement. She was already gathering her purse, her attention clearly moving on to her next task. I looked at Mr. Wallace, hoping for some kind of intervention, some legal protection I didn't understand. But he just gave me a sympathetic look and began organizing his papers. There is one more thing, he said quietly. Mrs. Parker, your husband left this for you personally. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Michael's familiar handwriting. I clutched the envelope to my chest as we left the office, Chloe already on her phone making arrangements with a real estate agent. The autumn air felt sharp against my skin, and the maple trees that had always seemed so welcoming now looked like they were closing in around me. The drive back to Cedar Lane felt like a funeral procession for one. Chloe had already left for the airport, promising to be in touch about the logistics as if we were business partners dissolving a company rather than a mother and daughter navigating the aftermath of losing the man we both loved. I sat in my car in the driveway for a long time, staring at the house that was no longer mine. The white picket fence Michael had painted every spring, the rose bushes I'd tended for decades. The porch swing where we'd spent countless evenings watching the sunset paint the Vermont hills gold and crimson. Inside, the house felt different already. Colder somehow, as if it knew it was about to change hands. I walked through the rooms slowly, touching familiar objects that would soon be packed away or sold. The grandfather clock in the hallway that chimed every hour, the dining room table where we'd hosted Christmas dinners and birthday celebrations, the built-in bookshelves Michael had crafted by hand during our first year of marriage. In our bedroom, my bedroom now I supposed, I finally opened Michael's letter. My hands shook as I unfolded the cream-colored paper. My dearest Helen, it began in his careful architect's handwriting. If you're reading this, then the worst has happened, and I'm no longer there to hold you when you need me most. I know you're confused and hurt by my will, and I know Chloe's reaction has probably made things worse. But please, my love, trust me one more time. The cabin on Maple Hollow Road is not what it appears to be. Look beyond the surface, as you've always taught me to do. Remember what I used to say about foundations. Sometimes the most important part of a structure is what lies beneath, invisible to the casual observer. Take the bronze key from my desk drawer. You'll know the one. Everything you need to understand is waiting for you there. I couldn't risk putting the truth in legal documents for reasons that will become clear. Chloe has chosen her path, and I've given her exactly what she values most. But you, Helen, deserve so much more than money. You deserve justice, vindication, and the security to live the rest of your life on your own terms. I love you beyond measure, and even death cannot change that. Trust the journey ahead, even when it seems impossible. Forever yours, Michael. I read the letter 3 times before the words fully sank in. A bronze key? I remembered the small brass key he'd kept in his desk drawer. I'd always assumed it was for his filing cabinet, or perhaps an old safety deposit box he'd forgotten about. The desk drawer stuck slightly, as it always had. Inside, beneath old business cards and rubber bands, I found the key exactly where Michael had said it would be. It was smaller than I'd remembered, tarnished with age, with tiny numbers etched along its edge that I'd never noticed before. That evening, as I packed my belongings into boxes that seemed far too small to contain 32 years of shared life, I heard a car door slam in the driveway. Through the window, I saw Chloe's rental car. She was back. She entered without knocking. It was her house now, after all. Mom, we need to talk. Her voice had the crisp, no-nonsense tone she used in boardrooms. I've been thinking about our situation. Our situation? I continued folding clothes, not trusting myself to look at her directly. The cabin thing. Look, I know it seems harsh, but you have to understand, I'm trying to be practical about this. Dad obviously wasn't thinking clearly when he made these arrangements. Grief can affect people's judgment. I stopped folding. Your father's judgment was perfectly clear, Chloe. He spent months working on that will with Mr. Wallace. Mom, be honest. What are you going to do with a falling down cabin in the middle of nowhere? You don't even drive on mountain roads anymore. There's no cell service out there, no neighbors for miles. It's not safe for a woman your age. The condescension in her voice sparked something fierce inside me. A woman my age? You know what I mean. Look, I have a proposal. She sat down across from me, adopting the posture I recognized from her rare visits home, leaning forward slightly, hands clasped, the picture of reasonable negotiation. I'll give you $200,000 for the cabin property. Cash. You can buy a nice condo in Burlington, be close to shopping and medical care, maybe even make some friends your own age. $200,000. For property that Michael had specifically left to me, that he'd insisted in his letter was more valuable than it appeared. And if I say no? Her mask slipped slightly. Mom, don't make this harder than it needs to be. I'm offering you a generous deal for worthless land. You'd be foolish not to take it. Foolish. I set down the sweater I'd been folding. Like I was foolish to spend 30 years supporting your father's career? Foolish to give up my own teaching position when you were born so I could raise you properly? Foolish to believe that family meant something more than real estate transactions? That's not fair, and you know it. I'm trying to help you here. No, Chloe. You're trying to help yourself. You want that cabin for some reason, and I'm starting to think your father knew exactly why. Her composure cracked completely then. Fine. You want to go live in squalor in the middle of nowhere? Be my guest. But don't come crying to me when you realize what a mistake you've made. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I want you out by the end of the week. The realtor is bringing potential buyers on Monday. After she left, I sat in the gathering darkness of what had been my living room, holding Michael's key and feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. But beneath the loneliness, something else was growing. Determination, maybe, or simple curiosity about what my husband had really left me. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall, dusting the windows like a benediction. The next morning, I loaded my Honda Civic with everything I could fit: clothes, photographs, my grandmother's china, and the few pieces of furniture small enough to transport. The rest would have to wait, though I doubted Chloe would store anything for me. She'd probably donate it all to charity for the tax write-off. The drive to Maple Hollow Road took 45 minutes through winding country roads that grew narrower and more isolated with each mile. I'd only been to the cabin twice before, once when Michael first inherited it 15 years ago, and again about 10 years later when we'd briefly considered renovating it as a summer retreat. Both times, we turned around after a quick inspection. The cabin had seemed beyond salvation. Rotting deckboards, a roof that leaked in multiple places, windows so grimy you could barely see through them. It had felt less like a potential home and more like a monument to neglect. But as I rounded the final curve and saw it again, something felt different. Maybe it was the fresh snow dusting the roof, or the way the morning sunlight filtered through the bare maple trees. But the cabin looked almost expectant, as if it had been waiting patiently for someone to see past its weathered exterior. I parked beside the old well and sat for a moment, gathering my courage. The silence here was absolute. No traffic sounds, no neighbors. Just the soft whisper of wind through pine branches and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. The front door stuck, swollen with years of moisture, but finally yielded to my determined pushing. Inside, dust motes danced in shafts of sunlight streaming through cracked windows. The main room was larger than I'd remembered, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall and wide plank floors that, beneath decades of grime, showed hints of beautiful old chestnut. But I wasn't here to admire the architecture. I was here to solve the mystery Michael had left me. I pulled out his key and began searching for whatever it might unlock. There were no obvious locks in the main room, so I moved methodically through the cabin's 3 rooms. the main living area, a small bedroom, and an even smaller kitchen with a hand pump for water. It was in the bedroom that I noticed something odd. The floorboards near the window didn't quite match the rest of the room. They were slightly newer, and when I knelt down and pressed on them, they gave slightly under my weight. Using a butter knife I'd found in the kitchen, I worked at the edge of one board until it lifted. Beneath it was a small metal box, locked, with a keyhole that looked exactly the right size for Michael's bronze key. My hands trembled as I inserted the key and turned it. The lock clicked open with surprising ease. Inside the box were documents, lots of them, survey maps, geological reports, and correspondence from something called the Vermont Geological Survey. But it was the letter on top that made my heart race. "Mrs. Parker," it read, "per your husband's instructions, we have completed the mineral assessment of your property on Maple Hollow Road. We are pleased to confirm significant deposits of high-grade quartz crystal formations, along with traces of rare earth minerals including beryllium and lithium compounds. Conservative estimates place the value of extractable materials at between $15 and $20 million, pending final environmental impact studies. Your husband has retained Klein & Associates to handle the legal aspects of mineral rights development. We await your instructions on how to proceed with extraction negotiations. Several major mining companies have already expressed preliminary interest based on our initial reports. Sincerely, Dr. Martin Boyd, Chief Geologist, Vermont Geological Survey." The letter was dated just 3 months ago, $20 million. $20 million of minerals underneath this worthless cabin that Chloe had been so eager to buy from me for $200,000. I sat back on my heels, understanding flooding through me like cold water. Michael hadn't left me a rundown cabin. He'd left me a fortune. But more than that, he'd left me the truth about who my daughter really was. Deeper in the box, I found copies of emails between Chloe and someone named David Klein, the mineral rights attorney mentioned in Dr. Boyd's letter. The correspondence went back 8 months, well before Michael's death. "Mr. Klein," one email read, "I understand my father has engaged your services regarding mineral assessments on family property. As his heir, I believe I should be kept informed of any developments that might affect the estate's value." David Klein's response was diplomatically worded, but clear. "Miss Parker, I can only discuss these matters with the property owner per your father's explicit instructions. He has been quite clear about confidentiality requirements." The final email in the chain was from Chloe, sent just 2 weeks before Michael died. "Mr. Klein, I think there's been a misunderstanding about the property ownership. I'll be inheriting the family assets, so any mineral rights development should be coordinated through me. Perhaps we should meet to discuss transition planning." I had to read it twice before the full impact hit me. Chloe had known. She'd known about the mineral rights, known about the geological survey, known that this cabin was worth millions. And she'd been positioning herself to claim it even before her father died. The box contained one more item. Another letter from Michael. This one written in his hurried handwriting. "Helen, if you're reading this, then you found what I hoped you would. I discovered Chloe's communications with Klein 3 weeks ago. She doesn't know that I know, but it explains everything. Why she's been so attentive lately. Why she insisted on handling the funeral arrangements. Why she was so eager to get to the lawyer's office. I've restructured the will to protect you and to teach her the lesson she needs to learn. The house and money will keep her comfortable, but the real treasure, this land and the security it represents, belongs to you. The choice of what to do next is yours. But know that you hold all the cards now, my love. You always have." Outside, snow was beginning to fall more heavily, and the afternoon light was fading. But inside the cabin, I felt warmer than I had in weeks. That first night in the cabin was both the loneliest and most empowering of my life. I'd managed to get the old wood stove working, and the warmth it provided felt like more than just heat. It felt like hope rekindling after months of being slowly extinguished. I spread my sleeping bag on. the old couch and lay there listening to the sounds of the forest settling around me. Owls called to each other in the darkness, and somewhere in the distance I could hear the gentle babbling of a creek I hadn't noticed during the day. It was so different from the suburban sounds I'd grown accustomed to on Cedar Lane. No traffic, no neighbor's television bleeding through thin walls, no constant hum of modern life, just silence and the crackling of burning wood, and the knowledge that beneath my feet lay a fortune that could change everything. The next morning, I drove into Burlington to find David Klein's office. I'd called ahead, introducing myself simply as Mrs. Parker and asking for a consultation about mineral rights. His secretary had fit me in for a late morning appointment. Klein and Associates occupied the third floor of a converted Victorian building near the university. David Klein himself was younger than I'd expected, probably in his early 40s, with the kind of earnest demeanor that suggested he'd chosen environmental law out of genuine conviction rather than just profit potential. "Mrs. Parker," he said, rising from behind a desk covered with geological maps and legal briefs, "I'm so sorry for your loss. Your husband was a remarkable man, incredibly thorough in his research and very protective of your interests. Thank you. I'm here because I found some documents that suggest there might be significant mineral deposits on my property." His face lit up. "Ah, you found Michael's cache. He said you would, eventually. He was very specific about the timeline, said you'd need to discover the truth for yourself rather than simply being told about it. It's great that you're still here. Could you do me a small favor? Like the video, and leave a white heart below. It really makes me happy to know you're still here. Mr. Klein, I'm going to be direct with you. I found emails between you and my daughter. She was trying to get information about the mineral rights before my husband died." He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Mrs. Parker, I want you to know that I never shared any confidential information with her. Your husband's instructions were very clear. All communications were to go through him, and after his death, directly to you as the property owner. But she knew something was valuable about that land. I suspect she did, yes. She was quite persistent in her inquiries. In fact," he hesitated, then opened a file drawer and pulled out a folder. "She contacted me again yesterday, left several voicemails asking about scheduling a meeting to discuss transitioning the mineral rights to proper family oversight." The audacity of it took my breath away. Even after our confrontation, even knowing I was now living on the property, Chloe was still trying to find ways to claim what Michael had left me. "Mr. Klein, I need to understand exactly what I'm dealing with here. What are these deposits worth, realistically?" He pulled out a detailed geological survey and spread it across his desk. The property map was covered with colored markings and technical notations that meant nothing to me. But his explanation made everything clear. Your property sits on what geologists call a pegmatite intrusion. Essentially, a pocket of rare minerals that formed under very specific geological conditions millions of years ago. The quartz crystals alone are of museum quality, but it's the lithium and beryllium deposits that make this truly valuable. He pointed to various sections of the map. Lithium is essential for battery technology, electric cars, smartphones, renewable energy storage. The demand is enormous and growing every year. Beryllium is used in aerospace and nuclear applications. These aren't common minerals, Mrs. Parker. Finding them in this concentration, this close to existing infrastructure, is extremely rare. And the value? Conservative estimates suggest $20 million in extractable materials. But if lithium prices continue to climb as expected, it could be significantly more. And that's just the minerals we can identify from surface surveys. There could be additional deposits deeper down. I sat back in my chair, trying to process the magnitude of what I'd inherited. $20 million, maybe more. Enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Enough to travel. Enough to help causes I cared about. Enough to never have to depend on anyone again. There's something else you should know, Klein continued. Your husband set up a very sophisticated legal structure to protect these rights. The mineral extraction can't proceed without your explicit consent, and any agreements you sign include clauses that protect you from exploitation. He was thinking several steps ahead. What would you recommend I do? That depends on what you want. We could negotiate with mining companies for a percentage of extracted value, typically between 15 and 25% of market value, paid out over the extraction period. Or we could sell the rights outright for a lump sum, though that's usually less profitable long-term. I thought about Chloe's offer of $200,000 for worthless land. What about family members who might try to challenge my ownership? Klein's expression hardened slightly. Your husband anticipated that possibility. The will is ironclad, and mineral rights are clearly specified as yours exclusively. Any challenge would be expensive and almost certainly unsuccessful. Plus, we have documentation of attempts to circumvent the legal process, which wouldn't look good in court. When I left Klein's office an hour later, I had a plan. But more importantly, I had power. For the first time since Michael's death, I felt like I was in control of my own destiny. The drive back to Maple Hollow Road felt different this time. The winding country roads weren't leading me to exile. They were leading me home. To my home, built on land that was worth more than Chloe's inheritance and the family house combined. That evening, as I sat by the wood stove planning my next move, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Chloe's number. I let the phone ring 3 times before answering, using those precious seconds to compose myself. When I finally picked up, my voice was steadier than I felt. Hello, Chloe. Mom, thank God. I've been worried sick about you. Her tone was different, softer, almost pleading. The sharp corporate edge had been replaced by something that sounded almost like the daughter I remembered from years ago. I drove by the cabin this afternoon and seeing your car there. Mom, you can't seriously be planning to live in that place. I'm managing just fine, thank you. Look, I know our conversation the other day got heated. I was stressed about the funeral arrangements, about getting back to work, about everything. I didn't handle it well. A pause. I've been thinking about what you said, about family meaning more than real estate transactions. You were right to call me out on that. I remained silent, curious to see where this sudden change of heart was leading. The truth is, I feel terrible about how things ended up. Dad's will. It doesn't sit right with me. I keep thinking he wasn't in his right mind when he made those decisions. You should have gotten more, Mom. A lot more. Your father's mind was perfectly clear, Chloe. Was it, though? I mean, leaving you isolated in the middle of nowhere while I get everything else? That doesn't sound like the dad I knew. He adored you. Her voice caught slightly. I think maybe he was trying to protect me financially. But he didn't consider the practical implications for you. I had to admire her performance. If I didn't know what I knew, I might have been touched by this apparent attack of conscience. What are you suggesting? I want to make this right. I've been talking to some people, financial advisors, estate planners, and I think we can restructure things more fairly. I'm prepared to give you half of the inheritance. $3 million, Mom. Plus you can come back to the house. We'll figure out a way to share it, or I'll buy you something nice in Burlington, whatever you prefer. $3 million. Half of what she'd inherited, but still only a fraction of what my mineral rights were worth. And the timing of this generous offer, coming just 1 day after my meeting with David Klein, was suspicious to say the least. That's very generous of you. Chloe, but I'm curious, what would you want in return? Nothing. Well, just the cabin property would revert to the estate. Technically, it should have been part of the larger inheritance anyway. It would clean up some legal complications and make the whole arrangement more equitable. There it was. The real purpose of her call, wrapped in concern for my welfare and guilt about the unfairness of Michael's will. She was still trying to get her hands on the mineral rights, just with a different strategy. I appreciate the offer, but I'm quite content where I am. Mom, be reasonable. You're living without proper heat, without reliable water, miles from medical care. What if something happens to you out there? What if you fall, or have a heart attack, or I'm 56 years old, Chloe, not 96. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. Her voice sharpened, and I caught a glimpse of her true frustration. You're being stubborn. I'm trying to help you here, and you're acting like I'm the enemy. Are you? The question hung in the air between us for a long moment. When she spoke again, her mask had slipped completely. I don't understand why you're being so difficult about this. It's a piece of worthless land, Mom. Worthless. I'm offering you $3 million for property that's probably not worth $3,000. Any reasonable person would jump at that deal. And yet, you seem remarkably eager to acquire this worthless property. Because I want to take care of you. Because I feel guilty about how Dad's will turned out. Because I'm trying to be a good daughter. Her voice was rising now, the corporate control completely abandoned. Why can't you just accept help when it's offered? I took a deep breath, remembering Michael's advice about the importance of foundations, the parts of a structure that weren't visible to the casual observer. Chloe, I know about the mineral rights. Silence. Complete, absolute silence that stretched on so long I wondered if the call had been dropped. I don't know what you're talking about, she said finally. But her voice was hollow. I know about the geological survey. I know about the lithium and beryllium deposits. I know about your emails with David Klein. Each revelation hit like a hammer blow, and I could practically hear her world shifting beneath her feet. I know you've been trying to claim those mineral rights since before your father died. Mom, I know the land you've been calling worthless is worth more than $20 million. Another long silence. When she spoke again, her voice was cold and flat. The real Chloe, stripped of all pretense. How long have you known? Does it matter? Dad told you, didn't he? Before he died, he must have. Your father protected me just like he always did. He made sure I'd discover the truth when I was ready to handle it. This is ridiculous. Those mineral rights should be part of the family assets. I'm the one with the business experience, the legal knowledge, the connections to handle this kind of complex negotiation. You don't know anything about mining contracts or environmental regulations, or I know enough to recognize a daughter who values money more than her own mother. That's not fair. Isn't it? You threw me out of my own home, Chloe. You told me to go live with the pigs. You called me a poor old woman and made it clear I was nothing more than an inconvenience in your plans. I could hear her breathing, rapid and shallow, on the other end of the line. So here's what's going to happen, I continued, my voice gaining strength with each word. I'm going to hang up now, I continued, savoring the moment of control I'd never had with Chloe before. And I'm going to think very carefully about what I want to do with my inheritance. My $20 million inheritance that you've been trying to steal from me. Mom, wait! I ended the call and turned off my phone. The silence that followed felt like a benediction. Over the next 3 days, I threw myself into making the cabin livable. It became a kind of meditation, this process of transformation. I scrubbed years of grime from the windows until they sparkled in the morning light. I swept and mopped the wide plank floors, revealing beautiful old chestnut wood that just needed some care to shine again. Walter Briggs, my nearest neighbor about a mile down the road, stopped by on the second day. He was a weathered man in his 70s who'd lived in these hills his entire life, and he brought a thermos of coffee and genuine curiosity about the new resident. Haven't seen anyone at the old Mitchell place in years, he said, settling into one of the rickety porch chairs I'd dragged outside. Your husband inherited it from his uncle, didn't he? That's right. I'm Helen Parker. Walt Briggs. Lived here since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. He poured coffee into 2 mismatched mugs I'd found in the kitchen cabinets. Mitchell was a character, that one. Always claimed there was treasure buried on this land. Used to joke about it whenever we'd run into him in town. My pulse quickened. Treasure? Walt chuckled. Well, that's what he called it. He'd spent some time out west in his younger days, worked in mining, came back here talking about reading the rocks and knowing good ground when you see it. Most folks thought he was just a harmless old coot with too much imagination. But you didn't? Let's just say Mitchell was a lot sharper than people gave him credit for. He spent his last years doing a lot of hiking around this property, collecting rock samples, taking notes. When he passed, your husband inherited all his papers, along with the land. So Michael had known about the mineral potential from the beginning. He'd probably spent years researching Mitchell's claims, quietly commissioning surveys and geological assessments. The bronze key hadn't just unlocked a box, it had unlocked a mystery that had been decades in the making. Mitchell ever tell you what kind of treasure he was looking for? Walt's eyes twinkled. Rocks that sparkle, he used to say. Rocks that the government would pay good money for. Course back then nobody much cared about lithium or beryllium or any of those fancy minerals. But times change, don't they? After Walt left, I called David. Klein from the cabin's landline, an old rotary phone that somehow still worked despite years of neglect. Mrs. Parker, I was hoping to hear from you. How are you settling in? Better than expected. David, I need to ask you something. How much did my husband really know about these mineral deposits? Quite a lot, actually. He'd been working with us for almost 3 years, ever since he found his uncle's research notes. Mitchell had done preliminary geological surveys back in the 1980s, long before the technology existed, to properly assess rare earth mineral deposits. 3 years. I sank into the old armchair by the fireplace. He knew for 3 years and never told me. He was protecting you, Mrs. Parker, and he was right to be cautious. Word of significant mineral deposits has a way of attracting the wrong kind of attention. He wanted everything properly documented and legally secured before moving forward. What kind of wrong attention? Unscrupulous mining companies that try to pressure landowners into unfavorable contracts. Speculators who drive up property values and then manipulate owners into selling cheap. Family members who suddenly develop keen interest in property they've ignored for years. The last comment hit home. You mean like my daughter? I'm not going to comment on family dynamics, but I will say that your husband was very specific about protecting your interests from all potential threats, internal and external. That evening, as I sat by the fire reading one of Mitchell's old journals that I'd found in a trunk under the cabin's eaves, my phone started ringing again. I'd turned it back on to call Klein, and now I was paying the price. Chloe had called 17 times in the past hour. I let it ring until it stopped, then immediately started again. On the 5th round of calls, I finally answered. What, Chloe? Mom, we need to talk. I'm driving up there. No, you're not. I'm already on the road. I'll be there in an hour. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, feeling the peaceful sanctuary I'd created over the past few days suddenly threatened. But then I looked around. The cabin, at the clean windows reflecting firelight, at the warm glow of the oil lamps I'd set up in corners, at Mitchell's journals full of careful observations and hand-drawn maps. And I realized something important. This was my home now, my sanctuary, my fortress built on a foundation of $20 million worth of rock and mineral. Chloe could drive up here and make demands all she wanted, but she had no power here, no legal standing, no moral authority, no leverage whatsoever. I was no longer the grieving widow who could be bullied and manipulated. I was a landowner with valuable assets and good legal counsel. I was a woman who'd discovered not just treasure, but her own strength. When headlights swept across the cabin windows an hour later, I was ready for her. I opened the door before she could knock, standing silhouetted in the warm light spilling from inside. Chloe stood on the porch in her designer coat and impractical shoes, looking cold and out of place against the rustic backdrop. Hello, Chloe. You're trespassing. Trespassing? Chloe stepped back as if I'd slapped her. Mom, I'm your daughter. I'm here because I'm worried about you. You're here because you want something that doesn't belong to you. I didn't move from the doorway, forcing her to remain outside in the cold November air. Say what you came to say, then leave. She glanced past me into the cabin, and I saw surprise flicker across her face. The warm light, the clean interior, the obvious signs that someone was not just surviving but thriving here. None of it matched the narrative she'd constructed about my helpless situation. Mom, please. Can we at least talk inside? It's freezing out here. We can talk right here. This conversation won't take long. Chloe wrapped her coat tighter around herself and took a deep breath. Okay, fine. You want directness? Here's directness. I know I handled things badly after Dad died. I know I was selfish and impatient and probably seemed heartless. But I was grieving too, Mom. I processed things differently. By trying to steal my inheritance? I wasn't trying to steal anything. I was trying to make sense of a will that seemed designed to punish me for being successful. Her voice rose slightly, then she caught herself and lowered it again. Look, I researched those mineral rights after our phone call. You're right. There's significant value there, more than I initially understood. $20 million worth of value. Yes, maybe more, depending on market conditions and extraction efficiency. She paused, studying my face. But Mom, that's exactly why you need help with this. Mining contracts are incredibly complex. Environmental regulations, extraction permits, royalty negotiations. These aren't things you can handle on your own. Who says I'm handling them on my own? Something shifted in her expression. You've already hired representation. I've had representation all along. Your father made sure of that before he died. Chloe's composure cracked slightly. Klein, that environmental lawyer Dad was working with, among others. Your father was very thorough in protecting my interests. Our interests, Mom. Family interests. That land represents generational wealth. Money that could secure not just your future, but mine and potentially grandchildren we haven't even met yet. Grandchildren? I almost laughed. Chloe, you've made it very clear that your career comes first. You've never even mentioned wanting children. That could change. People change, circumstances evolve. But if you sign some long-term mining contract without proper family consultation, I stepped forward, and she instinctively stepped back. Like the family consultation you provided when you decided to sell our home? Like the family consultation you offered when you told me to go live with the pigs? I was upset. People say things they don't mean when they're emotional, do they? Because you seemed pretty clear about your intentions. You wanted me out of your way so you could liquidate everything Dad left behind and get back to your real life in Manhattan. The wind picked up, sending dried leaves skittering across the porch between us. Chloe shivered, but I felt warm in my wool sweater and the protection of my own doorway. Okay, yes. I wanted to sell the house quickly, I admit that. But I didn't know about the mineral rights then. If I had, I would have approached everything differently. You did know about the mineral rights. I have your emails with David Klein going back 8 months. Her face went pale. Those were just... I was trying to understand Dad's financial situation, to be prepared for estate planning. You were trying to position yourself to claim property that wasn't going to be yours. While Dad was still alive, that's not how it was. Then how was it, Chloe? Explain to me how a series of emails asking about mineral rights ownership and transition planning was really just innocent family concern. She was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was smaller. I overheard Dad on the phone one day. With Klein. He was talking about geological surveys and rare earth minerals and significant value. I got curious. Curious enough to start making plans to inherit property that was never going to be yours. I thought. I assumed the whole estate would come to me. That's how these things usually work, isn't it? The house, the investments, any additional property, it all goes to the surviving child. Unless the person making the will has other ideas. But why? The question burst out of her with genuine anguish. Why would Dad give you the most valuable part of his estate and leave me with just money? What did I do wrong? For the first time since she'd arrived, I heard something real in her voice. Not manipulation or calculation, but actual confusion and hurt. It reminded me of the little girl who used to ask why other kids at school didn't want to be her friend, never understanding that her need to always be first, always be best, always be right, drove people away. Your father didn't punish you. Chloe, he gave you exactly what you value most, money and financial security. Liquid assets you can invest, spend, or save however you choose. But he gave you more. He gave me what I needed. Not just financial security, but the knowledge that I can take care of myself, that I don't have to depend on anyone else's generosity or goodwill, including mine, especially yours. She flinched as if I'd struck her. That's a terrible thing to say to your own daughter, is it? You've made it clear over the years that you see me as an obligation at best. Someone to check on occasionally, to provide perfunctory holiday calls, to tolerate during brief visits home. That's not true. When was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time you asked about my life, my interests, my dreams? When was the last time you treated me like a person instead of just your aging mother who needed to be managed? Chloe stared at me for a long moment, her breath visible in small puffs in the cold air. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I called you every Sunday. Duty calls. 5-minute conversations to check off your good daughter obligation for the week. I sent flowers on your birthday, ordered online and delivered by strangers. I visited for holidays, when your schedule permitted, and never for more than a day or two. Each exchange hit her like a physical blow. I watched her face cycle through emotions, defensiveness, anger, recognition, and finally something that might have been shame. I thought I was being a good daughter. I have a demanding career, Mom. 60-hour weeks, international clients, constant travel. I thought you understood that. I understood that your career came first. I understood that your father and I were expected to be grateful for whatever time you could spare from your real life. My real life. Her voice sharpened again. You mean the life I built through 15 years of education and 20 years of climbing the corporate ladder? The life that's allowed me to be financially independent and professionally respected? The life that's taught you to see everything, including family relationships, as transactions to be managed efficiently? She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. In the silence that followed, I could hear the distant sound of the creek and the whisper of wind through pine branches. This isn't about the money, is it? She said finally. What do you think? I think Dad knew exactly what he was doing when he wrote that will. Your father was a very wise man. He was teaching me a lesson. Was he? Or was he protecting me from having to learn one about you? Chloe wrapped her arms around herself, shivering in the cold. Mom, I know I haven't been the daughter you deserved. I know I've been selfish and distant and probably pretty awful to live with during visits. But I do love you. I do. Do you? Or do you love the idea of me, the supportive mother who's always there when convenient, who never makes demands, who's grateful for whatever attention you can spare? That's not fair, isn't it? Because standing here right now, after everything that's happened, you're still trying to figure out how to get your hands on my mineral rights. Even in your apology, you're calculating angles. She started to deny it, then stopped. Maybe I am. Maybe that's just who I've become, someone who sees every situation in terms of advantages and leverage and strategic positioning. And maybe that's why your father left things the way he did. To force me to confront what I've become? To give us both a chance to discover who we really are when the dynamic changes. Chloe looked past me into the warm, golden interior of the cabin. You seem different here, stronger, more confident. I feel different. For the first time in years, I feel like I have choices. Real choices, not just reactions to other people's decisions. Because of the mineral rights. Because of independence. The mineral rights are just the means to an end. And what's the end? I considered the question carefully, living the rest of my life on my own terms, making my own decisions about where to live, how to spend my time, who to trust with my vulnerability. And I'm not on that list. That depends. On what? On whether you can learn to see me as something other than an asset to be managed or an obstacle to be overcome. Chloe was quiet for a long time, staring down at her expensive shoes that were completely inappropriate for a country porch. When she looked up again, there were tears in her eyes. I don't know how to do that, Mom. I don't know how to relate to you as equals, I guess. You've always been Mom, the person who took care of everything, who managed the household, who supported Dad's career and my education and everyone else's dreams. I don't know how to see you as Helen Parker, independent woman with her own power and choices. It was the most honest thing she'd said since arriving. That's something you'll have to figure out for yourself. Will you help me? I don't know. Will you let me? What does that mean? It means no more manipulation, no more strategic thinking about how to manage me or position yourself to benefit from my decisions. No more treating our relationship like a business negotiation. And in return? In return, maybe we can discover what kind of relationship we might have if it was built on mutual respect instead of duty and convenience. Chloe wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her carefully applied makeup. What about the mineral rights? What about them? Are you going to... will you consider including me in decisions about development? Not because I have any legal claim, but because I'm your daughter? I studied her face, looking for signs of calculation or hidden agenda. But all I saw was uncertainty and something that might have been genuine vulnerability. We'll see. First, you need to prove that you can accept my ownership without constantly scheming to undermine it. How do I do that? Start by going home, Chloe. Back to your life in Manhattan, your important career, your busy schedule. Give me space to make my own decisions about my own property. And then we see what happens. Maybe in a few months, when you've had time to think about who you want to be in my life, we can talk again, as equals. She nodded slowly, seeming to understand that this conversation was ending and that pushing for more would only prove that she hadn't learned anything from it. I am sorry, Mom, for how I handled everything after Dad died, for the things I said, for making you feel unwanted in your own home. I know you are. That's not forgiveness, is it? It's acknowledgement. Forgiveness is something that has to be earned. Chloe left that night without another word, her headlights disappearing down the winding road like a retreating army. I stood on the porch long after the sound of her engine faded, breathing in the crisp mountain air and feeling something settle in my chest that I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Over the following weeks, I threw myself into the process of truly making the cabin home. I hired local contractors to fix the roof and upgrade the electrical system. I had a new well drilled and a proper septic system installed. Slowly, the rustic shelter transformed into a comfortable retreat that honored both its history and my needs. Walter Briggs became a regular visitor, stopping by most afternoons with coffee and local gossip. Through him, I learned that I'd become something of a legend in the small community of Maple Hollow. The widow who'd chosen independence over comfort, who'd turned her back on suburban security to build a new life in the mountains. Folks around here respect that. Walter told me one afternoon as we sat on my newly repaired porch, watching the first snow of winter dust the pine trees. Takes guts to start over at your age. 56 isn't exactly ancient, Walter. Maybe not, but it's old enough to know better than to take crazy risks. Except sometimes crazy risks turn out to be the smartest thing you ever did. He was right about that. Every morning I woke up in the cabin, I felt more like myself than I had in years. Not Michael's wife or Chloe's mother, but Helen Parker, a woman with her own dreams, her own resources, her own future to build. David Klein had been busy too. 3 major mining companies had submitted preliminary proposals for extraction rights, and the bidding war was driving the projected value even higher than the original estimates. Conservative projections now suggested my mineral rights could be worth anywhere from $25 to $30 million. The key, Klein explained during one of our weekly phone calls, is patience. The longer we wait, the more desperate these companies become, and the better our negotiating position. How long are we talking about? 6 months, maybe a year? Long enough to let them understand that this isn't distressed property being sold by someone who doesn't know its value. You're in complete control here, Mrs. Parker. You can afford to wait for the perfect deal. Perfect control. Perfect timing. Perfect vindication of Michael's faith in me. Chloe called twice during those first weeks, brief conversations that felt like she was testing the waters rather than trying to manipulate the situation. She asked about the weather, about how I was settling in, about whether I needed anything. I answered politely but didn't volunteer information. And she didn't push for details about the mineral rights negotiations. "She's learning," I told Walter one afternoon after describing one of these careful conversations. "Learning what?" "That I'm not the same person who can be bullied into compliance. That if she wants a relationship with me, it has to be on different terms." "You think she's capable of that kind of change?" "I don't know. But I'm finally in a position where I don't have to find out the hard way." The real test came in early December, when Chloe called to ask if she could visit for Christmas. "I know you probably have other plans," she said, her voice careful and uncertain. "But I was wondering if maybe I could come up for a day or two, not to talk business or anything like that, just to spend Christmas with my mother." I looked around the cabin, which had been transformed into something warm and welcoming. The stone fireplace now drew properly, filling the main room with gentle heat. The kitchen had been updated with modern appliances that worked with the cabin's rustic aesthetic. The bedroom had been expanded and furnished with comfortable furniture that invited rest rather than mere survival. "You can come," I said finally, "but I have conditions." "Okay. No discussion of mineral rights, mining contracts, or estate planning. No suggestions about what I should do with my property or my money. No commentary on my living situation or lifestyle choices. I understand. And Chloe, you'll be staying at the bed and breakfast in town. This is my home now, and I'm not ready to share it overnight with anyone." There was a pause, but when she spoke again, her voice held no trace of argument. "That's fair. I'll make a reservation. One more thing. You'll come as my guest, not as someone who's entitled to be here. If you can't respect those boundaries, don't come at all. I can respect them." "Mom, I want to respect them." Christmas Day dawned clear and cold, with fresh snow sparkling on the pine boughs like nature's own decorations. I'd spent the morning cooking a small turkey, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, and apple pie made from a recipe I'd found in one of Mitchell's journals. Written in his wife's careful handwriting. Chloe arrived at noon, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing clothes that were casual by her standards, but still looked expensive enough to fund a small vacation. She'd traded her usual designer heels for practical boots, and her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail rather than the severe professional style she typically favored. "The cabin looks amazing." "Mom?" she said, standing in the doorway and taking in the transformation. "It's like a completely different place." "It is a completely different place. Come in, let me take your coat." She moved through the main room slowly, taking in details, the warm lighting, the comfortable furniture, the bookshelves lined with volumes I'd collected over the years, but never had space to properly display. Her fingers trailed over the smooth surface of the dining table Walter had helped me build from reclaimed chestnut. "You did all this yourself?" "With help from local contractors and neighbors." It turns out there are advantages to living in a community where people still believe in helping each other. We sat down to Christmas dinner as the afternoon light slanted through the clean windows, casting golden rectangles across the table. For the first time in years, Chloe seemed genuinely relaxed. No phone buzzing with urgent emails. No distracted glances at her watch. No commentary about needing to catch flights or make calls. "This turkey is incredible." "Mom, where did you learn to cook like this?" "I've always known how to cook, Chloe. I just never had the time or energy to do it properly when I was managing everyone else's schedule." She paused with her fork halfway to her mouth. "I never thought about that. About what you gave up to take care of Dad and me." "It wasn't giving up. It was choosing, but now I'm choosing something different." We ate in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the distant call of winter birds. Finally, Chloe set down her fork and looked at me directly. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since that night I came up here, about the person I've become, about how I've treated you, about what Dad was trying to teach me with that will." "And what conclusions have you reached?" "That I turned into someone I don't particularly like." Someone who sees everything in terms of profit and loss, who treats relationships like business deals to be optimized. She picked up her wine glass, staring into the deep red liquid. I think I became successful by becoming ruthless, and I forgot how to turn that off when I came home. Success doesn't require ruthlessness. Chloe, it requires discipline and hard work and strategic thinking, but not ruthlessness. Maybe not. But it's easier to be ruthless than it is to be vulnerable. Easier to control situations than to trust other people to have your best interests at heart. I thought about that for a moment. And is that what you've been doing with me? Trying to control rather than trust? Yes, because trusting would mean accepting that you might make decisions I disagree with. That you might choose paths I wouldn't choose for you. That you might not need me in the ways I always assumed you did. It was perhaps the most honest self-assessment I'd ever heard from her. The mineral rights, she continued. I kept thinking about them as family assets that needed to be managed properly. I couldn't accept that they were yours to do with as you pleased, even if that meant making choices I thought were wrong. And now I'm trying to learn how to trust your judgment instead of questioning it. How to support your decisions instead of trying to influence them. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. For the first time in months, the gesture felt natural rather than obligatory. That means a lot to me. Chloe, I want to be a better daughter, Mom. I want to be someone worthy of the relationship you're offering. But I honestly don't know how to get from where I am to where I need to be. The same way I learned how to get from suburban widow to independent mountain woman. One day at a time, one choice at a time. After dinner, we sat by the fire while snow began falling outside the windows. Chloe asked about my plans for the mineral rights, and for the first time, I found myself wanting to share the details rather than guarding them. David Klein thinks we'll have final bids by spring. 3 companies are competing, and the numbers keep climbing. The latest estimate is close to $30 million. Chloe's eyes widened. 30 million? That's... She caught herself, visibly stopping whatever calculation or suggestion had been about to emerge. That's wonderful, Mom. You'll be able to do anything you want. What I want is to live here in this cabin for as long as I'm able. Maybe travel a little, see places your father and I always talked about visiting, support some causes I care about, live simply but well. That sounds perfect for you. What about you? What do you want, Chloe? Really want, not just professionally but personally? She was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire. I want to figure out how to be happy with what I have instead of always reaching for more. I want to learn how to build relationships that aren't based on what I can get from people. She paused, seeming to struggle with the words. I want to be the kind of person Dad would have been proud of, not just the kind of person who inherits money. Your father was proud of you, Chloe. Your intelligence, your determination, your success. He just wanted you to learn how to balance those strengths with compassion and humility, the way you did. I'm still learning too. This whole experience, losing your father, discovering the mineral rights, building this new life, it's taught me things about myself I never knew. About my own strength, my own capacity for independence, my own worth beyond what I could provide for other people. As evening settled around us, Chloe helped me clean up the dishes and prepare the cabin for night. There was something ceremonial about the process, banking the fire, checking the locks, turning down the lamps. She moved through the tasks with careful attention, as if she was learning the rhythms of a life very different from her own. Thank you for letting me come today, she said as she prepared to leave. For giving me a chance to be here without agenda or expectations. Thank you for coming as my daughter instead of as my business manager, she laughed. And the sound was lighter than I'd heard from her in years. I'm going to keep working on that distinction. Good. Because this is who I am now, Chloe. This independent woman with her own home and her own fortune and her own choices to make. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be with this version of Helen Parker. I want that relationship, Mom, more than I've wanted anything in a long time. after she left. I sat by the fireplace reading one of Mitchell's journals and learned the history of the land that had become my refuge. As the fire crackled and snow fell softly outside, I looked at the stars through the cabin window. For the first time since Michael's death, I didn't feel alone. I felt whole, and I knew wherever he was, he'd be proud of both of us. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this story, the ones on your screen are just for you. If this story brought a word, a thought, or a feeling to your mind, share it in the comments. Let's see whose words will touch the most hearts. Thank you for listening.